Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my friend Wias Issa, who is the CEO of a company called Ubiq, a very cool company. Weiss, nice to see you today.
You to it.
It's where are you calling in from? You and I are filming this in still in the middle of the pandemic. Where are you now?
It's a really terrible place called San Diego, where the weather 75, it's always sunny. It's a hard life, but we're getting through it.
Well, that sounds like tough duty. Hey, we're going to get into and hear about you and about the technology and company, but maybe just to start, why don't you give us a real brief summary of what Ubiq does? I'm somewhat familiar, but share with the others what you guys do.
Sure, would love to. Ubiq is an API-based encryption platform that was designed for developers, and it enables developers to build in strong cryptographically sound strategies into their applications directly with a few lines of code and 2 API calls.
Yeah, I was excited when you told me about this some time ago. You told me you were doing this. I was excited because you don't see a lot of encryption companies focused on developers, and I've long thought that was something that needed to be done. So I'm glad you guys are doing it. It's really great to see. So, hey, let's talk about you. Tell us how you got interested in this. You know, how did you come to what's your journey to be CEO of a cool tech company?
Wow, started my career in the early 2000s in tech, right when the bubble was about to burst. And I got into an ISP out on the East Coast in the DC area. And that's where I got exposed to IT for the first time. I was at the company for 2 years, learned the inside and outside of networking and switching and routing, and then some systems administration work. And back then, Cisco was a fledgling company. We were dealing with Novell networks and Lotus Notes for email. And then from there, I transitioned into what was then a nascent cybersecurity industry. I joined Symantec, managed services business based in Washington, D.C. as well. And I did a whole bunch of things there, everything from a security operations engineer to DevOps engineering before DevOps was a thing itself. And then transitioned into leadership roles, security operations, delivery. And then I was recruited out of Symantec and I joined Mandiant. And there we were really focused on doing computer crime investigation. Forensics was really our wheelhouse. Absolutely phenomenal place to be at a great time. And then Mandiant was acquired by FireEye, and that allowed me to move out of the DC area to San Francisco. And I spent about a year in San Francisco, and then I had the opportunity to go overseas to help build a managed service business in APJ for FireEye. And I found myself in Singapore for about 9 months. And then I moved over to Japan. I was in Japan for almost 2 years. And then from Japan to San Diego, and that's where I am now, here with Ubiq.
Oh, that's quite an education. So what are some of the big themes you saw? I imagine you watched sort of the perimeter dissolve and cloud get popular and things like that. Are those the themes you watched?
Absolutely. I mean, it all started off with antivirus.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we've got all these routers in place. The ACLs just aren't effective, and you saw the emergence of firewall technology. And then the introduction of IDS and IPS, and you saw the defense in depth strategies emerge. And then over time, things shifted away from the perimeter and back to the endpoint. And you have the emergence of forensics tools and services, and really the creation and the birth of the incident response segment, which gave birth to companies like Mandiant and CrowdStrike.
What did you learn in AsiaPack? What were some of the themes that you saw there?
Wow, the biggest one is, as much as you think that markets are similar, they're just as wildly different. The types of threats that companies faced, the approaches to defending themselves from a threat modeling point of view, from a security program point of view, just so different. It all ties back to different business models. Here in the US, there's a lot of autonomy in companies, and you generally have the role of a CISO, a very well-defined CTO or CIO position. But in many places in Asia Pacific and Japan, CISO roles don't exist. They're just a feather in someone's hat. So how you approach those companies and how they approach security can be radically different from how we do it here in the US.
Are they just behind? Is there just a lag? Because I would imagine the CISO position will populate just as fully as it has here, just maybe later. Is that what's going on?
In some markets, there's certainly a lag. In other markets, what I find is how they end up implementing security and the resources that power their security organizations aren't necessarily people that work at the company. So here in the US, security teams are generally part of the company. They're full-time employees. But in many markets overseas, in Asia Pacific and Japan specifically, what you find is it's a heavily outsourced model. So there's services providers and managed security service providers that are actually powering the security organizations for big, large companies.
Interesting. Well, let's jump to Ubiq. What was the what prompted you to get involved in what you're doing now with encryption and so on? What was the prompt?
I would say the first thing that we sought out to do is what is a really, really complicated, ugly, messy problem that
sounds like data security to me, right?
Right? No one wants to deal with it, but everyone feels compelled that they have to, or somebody's telling that they must. It could be a regulatory body, it could be the board, but something really ugly and messy that just everyone wants to say, forget about it, I don't want to handle this. And that's really what led us to encryption. And when you think about encryption, no one thinks, oh, I'm excited. There's a smile on my face, and I can't wait to manage keys, and I can't wait to select my algorithms and integrate this into my environment. And that's really what led us to how do you solve the problem of making something that's so complicated and there's so much math behind really simple.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and I spent a lot of time thinking after we'd first spoken about this idea of simplifying cryptography, and in particular for developers. I wasn't sure I understood in the beginning, but the more I thought about it, I come to understand the value there. What's been kind of the feedback from your customers and maybe some of the developers to this emphasis to making cryptography very accessible to their software development activities? What are you hearing back from them?
Initially when we prepare and present the concept, we walk through our presentations. You could sense a bit of skepticism, but it's very much a muted skepticism. There's silence. And then we get to the demo point. And we have a firm belief at the company that we don't do demos on laptops. We don't do demo on staging. All of our demonstrations are in live production environments. Yeah. It's exactly what our customers, our end users would be experiencing. And we take somebody from literally going from zero encryption inside of an application to having encryption built into the encryption directly into the application within 5 minutes in production on a real app and demonstrating that capability. I think at that point, what ends up happening is there's a, oh my God moment where did this really just happen? Did you just really solve a really complicated problem in a matter of minutes?
Yeah, and I believe you serve this up through APIs, right? So this is something that a developer, say with maybe not much experience in cybersecurity, maybe didn't read Bruce Schneier's book or something, and they're just, and they realize they've got a requirement. Is that kind of the sweet spot where you've got software developers that really just want something that they can use that's not a big deal? That's been my understanding. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right, Ed. The interesting thing is our users are almost always developers. Sometimes they're application security engineers, but they're people who have development skills, and those skills range from early in their career developers to very senior developers. Yeah. And developers for the last really 10 years have been exposed to the API economy, which are services and other solutions that deliver core capabilities and features to customers through APIs because it's elegant, it's easy to scale, and it helps remove solving that problem from the customer.
Do you have a range of sort of criticalities that you're dealing with? Like I know you'd shown me at one point some of the customers. They look like some pretty typical business critical apps, but where does it leave off? Like, do you protect nuclear power plants and stuff like this, or what is sort of the sweet spot for your customer base?
It's mostly enterprise applications that would be using. That's where we find the most use cases. We do have developers who have much smaller scale applications that they're developing. Could be mobile, could be tablet, but they're generally microservice or web service based applications that are being used inside of a company.
And I'm guessing most of these folks are prompted by, and you tell me, is it sort of a combination of both compliance and threat, or what's causing the need for cryptography? Why do they call you guys? What's generally the motivation?
Well, it really depends on who the individual is, who the user or the customer is. When we deal with traditionally larger companies, there's two camps. There's the people who know I've got to do encryption because that's the right thing to do from a security point of view. And then within that group of companies, there's also a set that are like, I have to be compliant. It's non-negotiable. And that's really what's driving them to come to us. When you look at the developer side of the house, where we're not talking about generally enterprise, large enterprise, could be mid-enterprise, could be earlier stage companies or cloud first or born in the cloud companies, people who are used to consuming API-based services, a lot of their drivers are not necessarily compliance. It's, this is the right thing to do. I have an appreciation for security. I have a strong respect for security, but frankly, there's so many things that as a developer I'm expected to know and do nowadays that I don't have the time to go learn the ins and outs of security, let alone the ins and outs and the complexities around encryption and cryptography.
That's awesome. Now, I know we have a number of people watching who may be thinking about or in the process of starting their own company. So I always like to ask people who are in the business and running a company, how'd you get it started? Like, what was your process for putting a team together and getting some funding? What were some of the highlights? Maybe some of the low points, but what were the real big milestones as you put the company together?
I would say the first absolute step is, what complicated problem are you going to solve?
Yeah.
One, people care about.
Yeah.
Two, is a burning hair on fire problem. Three, that they're willing to pay for. And four, they're willing to pay a company they've never heard of.
Yeah, like that's the market need kind of piece. I totally agree with that. But how did you partner up with some people that you knew, or what was the next step there?
Yeah, really, the first step after you really identify a few of those, because you're not going to get it right the first time.
Right.
Is identify a few what I call hypotheses. Mm-hmm. And then before you go build a team or a platform or a company or invest in infrastructure and software development, the next thing you should do, at least what we did, was go talk to people that you think would be using or buying this thing. And that doesn't require a nickel. It just takes time and effort to put something together, a talk script or maybe one or two slides, and then call really intelligent people in the market that are either buyers or users or developers. And you're not going to get the buyer or the user right the first time. So, be broad, talk to CTOs, talk to CIOs, talk to CISOs, and don't just focus on that C-level. Talk to security directors, talk to security architects, talk to forensics people. And that's going to give you a real good indication of, is there really a problem here to solve?
Yeah.
And then answer those other questions. And that'll also help you really narrow down which hypothesis should actually pursue and go after. Because invalidating and validating that hypothesis is one of the critical steps that a lot of startups forget to do. They just jump into, hey, I think this is the right thing to do. It's a very much inside out perspective. And what we firmly believe, and I'm a big believer in this, is the answers to most of your questions are outside the building. Go talk to people. That's the next major step.
Yeah. You had a big advantage because you were out, in your previous roles talking to a lot of customers. So I would imagine it would be hard to come into cybersecurity, maybe without at least having had some experience talking to customers. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
I think it would be hard. Yeah.
It's all about, talking to people in your network and friendly. If I don't know the world of the API economy well, then there's somebody certainly in my network that does, or that knows somebody that does. And we went through the same process. I interviewed countless CTOs, CISOs, security directors, security professionals, and then I asked them, is there anyone in your network that would be willing to have a conversation? No strings attached, half hour. I just want raw, unfiltered feedback.
Mm-hmm. Did you go down the funding route? How did you put the company together? What was your process there?
Initially, it was Bootstrapped and funding. Once we nailed down, this is the problem you want to go solve, answered all those questions, had enough evidence to be able to demonstrate to a venture capitalist or angel investors that there's something here, it was Bootstrapped, and then we moved to that next phase of getting venture funding.
Good for you. That's the way to do it. I usually what I recommend is the best validation of all is if you can build something and you get some customers, then that will get you a better deal too when you do go off to your angels and VCs. Hey, any sort of predictions about the future? Like as you go forward, do you? I always predict things like I think cloud is going to eat everything, but what from an encryption perspective, like quantum, is that a big issue that you guys worry about, or what are some things on the horizon?
Not necessarily. Quantum's not really. I mean, it's on the radar, but it's not a big concern at the moment because I think quantum computing is far out enough where, it's not an immediate concern.
That's right.
As it relates to quantum, though, there are ciphers out there right now that address that quantum computing, threat.
Mhm.
From an overall market direction point of view, if I think about the entire enterprise software market across all different segments from security to cloud to other types of software, I think the big shift, and this is already happening, so it's not necessarily my prediction per se, but I think the API delivered segment of the market is going to just grow at a massive rate and
Yeah,
just
I
become,
would agree. I would agree.
and that's evidenced already by companies like Twilio and Stripe and more emerging companies like Auth0. People are realizing that it just doesn't make sense for me to build in messaging or try to figure out payment processing or identity access management. There's really hard problems to solve, and they take a really long time, and I'm going to make a bunch of mistakes. So if I can turn to an API vendor that's what they focus on, that's going to help give me time and money back and get my developers and my security teams focused on what they should be, which is our core product and our own environment. So I think there's going to be a big shift, continued growth in that segment.
That is very cool. Well, Wies, I really want to congratulate you and wish you the best with Ubiq. Sounds like a very cool approach to what I think is an excellent area to be working. I mean, any developer who's not weaving crypto into their software through an API really ought to think that through. There's no reason not to. And I appreciate everything you do for the industry. Keep up the good work. It's all good stuff.
Thanks, Ed. Credit goes to the team. I'm just simply the mouthpiece. I'm the guy that gets to have the fun videos with folks like yourself, Ed. But I thank you.
Is your website the best place for people to get more info?
That's right. Perfect place.
Okay, that's good. Well, listen, we'll be watching and participating and using your technology. Again, I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ed. Have a great week.
Right, and we'll see everyone next time.